Hello, beautiful people. I'm Chris Maddox, founder of the Wild Woman Project and Wild Woman Fest. And I'm speaking to you today because we always meet like this at new moon time. And the new moon is upon us. It arrives on October 6th, 2021. So this year at the Wild Woman Project, we are starting each and every new moon cycle with a poem written by a wild woman poet. And this poem becomes a kind of centering poem for us, offering a point of focus, themes, and giving us the great gift of seeing the world through a wild woman's eyes and an artist's eyes. So we'll start this new moon cycle with a poem from the profound and creative and deeply courageous Joy Harjo of the Muscogee Nation. She is the first Indigenous poet laureate in the United States, and she is a prolific creatrix. Prolific. So I want to start by reading her words about poetry before we go into our centering poem. So see if you can just let her words wash over you. She's speaking about poetry here. When I began to listen to poetry, it's when I began to listen to the stones. And I began to listen to what the clouds had to say. And I began to listen to other. And I think most importantly for all of us, when you begin to learn to listen to the soul of yourself in here, which is also the soul of everyone else. So today we're going to listen deeply to Joy Harjo's listening. And by listening to her listening, we'll listen to her soul and maybe get a taste of the universal soul, the one great thing that we all share and are connected by. So our poem is called Perhaps the World Ends Here. And this is from Joy Harjo's collection called The Woman Who Fell from the Sky. The way I want to do this is I've just separated this into 2 small chunks and 1 large chunk. So I'll read the small chunk, 1 small chunk, then we'll stop and we'll breathe with it and we'll ponder. Then we'll read the next chunk and we'll stop and we'll breathe with it and we'll ponder. And then finally we'll read the 3rd longer chunk and do the same thing. So as I'm reading this, make sure you're breathing well and see if you can pay attention to where you resonate with what she's saying, where you feel what she's saying, and just generally be open to see what comes through in the listening of the poem. Here we go. The world begins at a kitchen table. No matter what, we must eat to live. The gifts of the earth are brought and prepared, set on the table. So it has been since creation, and it will go on. So I'm going to stop right there. She gives us the setting. And the setting of this poem is the kitchen table. She sort of speaks about why it is the setting, that like no matter what, in order to continue living, we must eat. So she's pointing to the essential nature of food. And she names it in this beautiful way. One of the great gifts of reading her poetry is really getting a window into the indigenous perspective that is really earth connected and earth honoring. So she calls food the gifts of the earth. That's how she's thinking about it. The gifts of the earth are brought to the table and prepared. And she says, so it has been since creation, and it will go on. Reminding us, I think, hearing that is, we're so used to hearing our Western myths and creation stories and scientific theories. And what we can remember when we're listening and we're sitting with Joy Harjo, in her words, is that her perspective comes from a lineage that has its own creation stories and its own mythology and its own value set. And one that I think for so many of us who resonate with the wild woman archetype or wilderness in general, are hungry for perspectives that are earth connected, earth honoring, embodied, of the earth versus, like the more modern kind of disconnected, electronic, et cetera, et cetera. I think what we get here is this sense that we're tapping in to Joy Harjo's the mythology of her people, which is a huge gift. Next chunk, small chunk. We chase chickens or dogs away from it. Babies teethe at the corners. They scrape their knees under it. It is here that children are given instructions on what it means to be human. We make men at it. We make women. So in this chunk, she's starting to point to the relations, the relationship. She talks about, keeping the chickens away from the table and the dogs, and the way the babies relate to it, that they're teething on its edges and falling down underneath it. Naming the children and how it is here at the table that the children are given instructions on what it means to be human. The growing into adults, getting all of those lessons really around the table. I think remembering, in the first part, she's naming the essential nature of food and the kitchen table. And here she kind of like fleshes that out to include all of the relationships, all the community, the village, the tribe, whatever is the word, that means the family. That we are not isolated in our experiences, but that we are in relationship. And that's part of the kitchen table. This is a longer chunk, so breathe with me as I read it. At this table, we gossip, recall enemies and the ghosts of lovers. Our dreams drink coffee with us as they put their arms around our children. They laugh with us at our poor falling down selves, and as we put ourselves back together once again at the table. This table has been a house in the rain, an umbrella in the sun. Wars, have begun and ended at this table. It is a place to hide in the shadow of terror, a place to celebrate the terrible victory. We have given birth on this table and have prepared our parents for burial here. At this table, we sing with joy, with sorrow. We pray of suffering and remorse. We give thanks. Perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table while we are laughing and crying, eating of the last sweet bite. So in the first chunk, she names the setting and its essential nature. In the second chunk, she talks about all of the relationships, all the we that are around the table. And then in this last bit, she talks about all the things that we do at the table, that we gossip and, recall enemies and ghosts of lovers. She talks about drinking coffee with her dreams as they wrap their arms around her children. She talks about, falling apart and putting ourselves back together at the table. She talks about the way that the table is a shelter, from the rain, from the sun. She names war. Yeah, that the wars have begun and ended at a table like this. And that it's a place to hide from terror, and that it's also a place to celebrate the terrible victory, naming from her perspective that even in war, when you are the victor, it's still terrible. That's a very real part of her perspective. She talks about giving birth on the table. She talks about that in her tradition, they prepare their elders, their parents' bodies for burial at the table, naming that that portal into the physical experience and the portal out of the physical experience. Birth and death happen right here, right in the middle, right at this table. She talks about singing with joy and with sorrow. You can see throughout the entire poem, she's holding the range of the human experience, that we dream and we give thanks and we are joyful and we sing, and also that we live in moments of terror, that there is sorrow, that there is death. And she's holding in this one poem that it's all part of it. I think we have the value of hearing her perspective, which is really rooted in her ancestry, in the story and the evolution of her people and what they have seen and what they have experienced. She has a beautiful and poetic voice for her people. We have a way of, in our Western thinking, and I notice it a lot in like spiritual community, like putting the happiness or the quote, the light or whatever, above as something that's better than, the moment where we die or someone we love dies, or the moment of fear or whatever, that is a lesser thing. And what Joy Harjo brings to the table here, literally like to the kitchen table, is that it is all part of it. It is part of the wholeness of the experience of being human, of the experience of being alive. And there's nothing wrong with that. That there is nothing wrong with that, that that is real and human. She ends with this incredible line. Perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table while we are laughing and crying, eating of the last sweet bite. Hmm. So as we live through these extraordinary times that we're living through, recently I've been just hearing from more elders who have kind of named, like, you know, this, what we're going through right now, this time in history, doesn't seem to just be like a rocky patch anymore. It seems to be an extraordinary time, a really, truly extraordinary time. So it has been bringing for me, and I don't know about for you, um, a lot of really deep thinking and a lot of deep questions. And specifically, one of the ones that comes to mind is straight from this poem. And the question is, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be human? What is life all about? So, like, an enormous question. And you ask any person on the earth that question, you're going to come back with a lot of different responses. But I think that, as we sit at this new moon time, to ask oneself, what does it mean to be human to me? Like here, Joy Harjo talks about what she thinks is essential. She names the kitchen table, what we do there, who's there with her. She literally says the first line is the world begins at the kitchen table, and the last line is perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table. What is it for you? What in your value set, in your heart, in your soul, what is the most important thing about being human, or most important things about being human? What is essential to life as you understand it? So I recommend journaling with that question. What is essential to life as you understand it? What is being human all about? What's it for? If you journal with that for a bit and come up with something you'd like to share, I'd love to read in the comments anything that comes from your inner guidance. Anytime we sit deeply with a question and we're able to come back with an answer and sit in circle or in community in some way, even if it's just writing to each other, and to really get the perspective of one another, we really learn so much. And there's such a value in the sort of multiplicity of perspectives. When we ask ourselves these questions, what is most essential about being human to you? What is essential to life from where you're sitting? And if you can sit with that in your journal and you can begin to form an answer and you can begin to name that, you learn something about what's really important to you. And when you learn something about what's really important to you, then you learn something about how you can orient your life so that it is in alignment with what is true and what is real for you. So may that be juicy for you. May that be juicy for you. And maybe you want to go find Joy Harjo's poem, Perhaps the World Ends Here. There's you can get it again from that collection, The Woman Who Fell from the Sky. There's also at the Poetry Foundation website, you can print out a copy of this beautiful poem. Yeah, and if you'd like to explore this poem in community, in circle, we have circles happening all over the world. Many of them happen online at this point. And you can sit in one of our Wild Woman Project circles with a trained facilitator and in community and meditate around this question and share around this question and do an intention setting ritual around this question and this poem and this theme. So you can find a list of circles and circle leaders and a link below this video. Also, if you are called to be a bigger part of the Wild Woman Project or called to step into feminine leadership, we have our Circle Leader Training Program, which is in its 11th year of life. It's coming up. It starts on October 25th. Registration just opened. So space is limited. Early registration is encouraged. And I just want to let you know, like, it's all online and it's one part Wild Woman spirituality, where we're really looking to nature as our spiritual teacher and guide. We're looking to the moon. We're relating to the wild woman archetype. We're waking up our own inner guidance and our own instinctual self. And then on the other hand, about the other half of it is skill building. So how to lead a potent meditation and ritual, how to build your community, how to facilitate in person and online. So it's a mix of those two really important elements. So if that seems juicy to you, check out the link below this video, check out Circle Leader Training, claim your spot. We'd love to have you. It's a 7-week adventure and each and every one is really profound. And last but not least, this moon cycle coming up very soon. It's the day after the full moon on October 21st. Wild Woman School is back in session, and this year's Wild Woman School, we're going to focus each session on a particular tool to help with resilience in these times, creativity in these times, and spiritual autonomy in these times. So this Wild Woman School session is all about how to work with tarot and oracle cards for spiritual guidance and creativity. I facilitate the session. I've been working with this particular tool for over 15 years, and there is so much that we can garner in relationship to this particular tool. So feel free to join us. It's choose your own price. There are scholarships available. Check it out, link below this video, Wild Woman School. So I'm going to close this now with that final line one more time. So breathe with me as I say it. Perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table, while we are laughing and crying, eating of the last sweet bite.